Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
Wildfires continue to burn across Israel. Some near Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are out of control. Nearly 80,000 people have been evacuated. More than a dozen people were arrested on suspicion of arson.
The wildfires that have engulfed huge stretches of forest now stretch across half the country. But even as firefighters rein in some blazes, new fires have erupted in multiple locations. That's led police to believe arsonists are to blame. Investigators also found evidence that gasoline had been used to start one fire. Government officials describe those arrested as minorities, code for either Palestinians or Arab citizens living in Israel, but there have been no details provided. More than 70,000 people have had to flee from the northern city of Haifa, and while firefighters have begun to bring that blaze under control, a new fire erupted on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Witnesses said someone hurled a firebomb from a neighboring Arab village. So far, no deaths or serious injuries have been reported. Fighting the fires has become an international operation with air support from Russia, Turkey, Italy, Cyprus, and others.
And at least 10 people have been killed and dozens wounded by a car bomb in the Waberi district of the Somali capital, Mogadishu. Police and medical sources say the explosion happened at a checkpoint near a busy and densely populated vegetable market, and the death toll may rise. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far.
And a suspected Islamic State suicide bombing has killed several and injured 12 in the Syrian town of Al Rai, and wounded mostly young children and were taken to a hospital in nearby Turkey. In another attack in northern Syria, a report by Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency said that the suspected chemical weapon used by ISIL may have been an eye-irritating compound in ammunition. 22 Turkish-backed Syrian opposition fighters were wounded, and the rebels have for days been besieging the IS-controlled town of Al-Bab as part of this 3-month-old offensive to drive the jihadists away from the Syrian side of the Turkish border.
Additional units to the area of 19th and College. We have several pedestrians struck by a vehicle.
The time on the Ohio State campus was 9:52 a.m., and a clutch of students and teachers had assembled outside because a building fire alarm had sounded. They were easy targets for a man who drove his Honda Civic onto the sidewalk and into them, then got out and slashed as many onlookers as he could with a butcher knife.
Yeah, I need medics at the McQuigg lab as soon as possible. All patients are alert and oriented, but severe bleeding out of some of them.
The attacker was identified as a student at OSU, Somali-born Abdul Razak Ali Artan. Joseph Knoll, a junior at OSU, was on the street a few feet away.
And I heard a bunch of screaming, so I took my headphones out, and all these people were rushing over this way. At first I thought it was some sort of game or something, until I could see everyone's faces. And
what
I knew
their faces looked like.
They were terrified.
Campus police were already at the scene investigating a gas leak that triggered that fire alarm, and Officer Alan Haruchko took action.
Chief, we got one down, critical down here. The shooter's in custody.
Ohio State University's chief of police is Craig Stone.
Our officers was on scene in less than a minute, and he ended the situation less than a minute. He engaged the suspect, and he eliminated the threat. The suspect is DOA.
As the events unfolded, the university sent out alerts to students in unmistakable terms. Run, hide, fight. Key instructions used in campus-wide training to indicate an active threat. The response was immediate. as students barricaded themselves in classrooms while waiting about 2 hours for the all clear.
Evidence from the suspect's past may lead to a motive for the attack. Law enforcement vehicles lined the street outside Abdul Razik Ali Artan's apartment complex last night. Sources say Artan put an angry message on Facebook before the attack. He wrote, quote, "America, stop interfering with other countries, especially the Muslim Ummah. We are not weak." The worst fire to hit Tennessee in 100 years has killed at least 3 people and sent more than a dozen to the hospital.
Hit the gas! Hit the gas! You're watching cell phone video taken by 2 brothers as they escaped from a vacation resort area in the mountains of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. They say they had no warning as the wall of flames surrounded them last night, and their only choice was to ride through it or die.
Please, Lord, let us get off this mountain.
By early evening, wind speeds suddenly doubled, turning into hurricane-force winds that topped 87 miles per hour. Fires quickly spread in this drought-stricken area when burning embers flew and toppled trees ripped down power lines.
This is so close to the resort.
This community is at the edge of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the most visited national park in the country.
The smoke is like really bad.
Logan Baker was at the Vista Hilton Hotel when flames came right up to the building.
They're keeping us in here for now.
Bruce Wilson is the Sullivan County Fire Chief. What is it like to actually be there?
It's horrible. I mean, it's devastating to, all those people lost their homes and businesses and everything else. Things they worked hard for.
This is what's left. More than 100 businesses and homes were destroyed. Just take a look at this. It was once an apartment building. Neighborhoods were left in smoking cinders. At this Red Cross shelter, more than 1,000 showed up, anxiously waiting to see what's left. Greg Lanham and his family escaped with their pets and the clothes on their backs.
Possessions are possessions. As long as I've got my family, that's all that matters, really.
Moving to Japan now, where around 310,000 chickens and ducks have been culled at a farm on the coast of the Sea of Japan. It comes after a highly pathogenic strain of H5 avian influenza was detected in 5 birds in Niigata and Aomori. Workers dug trenches and buried the slaughtered birds to contain the spread of the virus. The Environment Ministry is sending investigation experts to the affected areas and has issued the highest caution warning in the country.
And the crew of an Iranian small craft aimed its gun at a U.S. Navy helicopter in the Strait of Hormuz this weekend. This is according to the Defense Department. The chopper was flying ahead of the USS Eisenhower as it headed out of the Persian Gulf. The Defense Department official called the move by the Iranians unsafe and unprofessional.
Civilians carrying only the barest necessities began to move out of eastern Aleppo as Syrian troops moved in. This woman fled with her mother in a wheelchair, recently dead from lack of food and water. We haven't had very much for 5 months, she said. The government, backed by Russia, offered bus transport away from the battle zone. Since the weekend, the Syrian army and its allies have taken 40% of the territory held by opposition fighters since 2012. The intense bombardments of this offensive have leveled buildings across eastern Aleppo, including the home of Bana al-Abed, who, along with her mother, has been tweeting about their plight, which has now gone from dire to desperate. One of her last messages read, "Tonight we have no house. It's bombed. I got in the rubble. I saw deaths, and I almost died."
The United Nations says nearly 16,000 civilians have escaped from eastern Aleppo after government forces drove insurgents from 40% of the territory they had held. Russia, which has backed the Syrian government, said the push in Aleppo had radically changed the situation on the ground and allowed humanitarian aid to reach more than 80,000 civilians. France, however, has criticized the offensive and called for an immediate Security Council meeting to discuss the situation in the city.
At least 3 people are dead in Alabama after a suspected tornado swept through the South last night. The 3 people who died were in a mobile home in northeastern Alabama in a community there called Rosalie. There were a number of other injuries in the area. 16 to 20 buildings were destroyed. Other possible tornadoes were spotted across the South in Louisiana, Mississippi, and southern Tennessee.
18-year-old Somali refugee Abdul Razak Ali Artan
who obtained a green card to enter the United States in 2014, injured 11 students on the Ohio State University campus yesterday, first striking them with a car and then exiting the car to attack the students with a butcher knife. WorldNet Daily reports campus police chief Craig Stone said, "Our officer was on the scene in less than a minute, and he ended the situation in less than a minute. He engaged the suspect and he eliminated the threat. The suspect is DOA." Artan had been quoted in the campus newspaper, The Lantern, several months ago, complaining about the school's lack of Islamic prayer rooms. He blamed the negative view Americans have of Muslims on Islamophobia planted in their minds by the U.S. media, not by the numerous terror attacks or sexual assaults. And the delusional blame game continues to mushroom. Tariq Nasheed, an extreme left documentary filmmaker, bemoaned so white officer Alan Haruko, who shot and killed the black Somali stabbing suspect in Ohio, is being paraded as a hero? That's interesting. Anti-Second Amendment Senator Tim Kaine tweeted, "Deeply saddened by the senseless act of gun violence at Ohio State this morning, praying for the injured and the entire Buckeye community." Of course, no gun was used. Paul Joseph Watson pointed out that a woman named Kay tweeted, "Poor kid goes through hell as a child in Somalia, comes to America, probably been bullied by racists in white Ohio. Now he's dead. Thanks, Trump." And even the New World Order chimed in as Anna de Rothschild tweeted, "Thoughts and prayers are with the victims in Ohio. America must wake up and abolish your Second Amendment. It is 100% the problem. Trump is blind." Meanwhile, back here in reality that exists 24/7 outside of the Twitter universe, people in Columbus, Ohio now have more reason to be looking over their shoulder. As recent as February of 2016, Mohammed Berry, a Muslim immigrant from Guinea, charged into the Nazareth restaurant and deli in Columbus, Ohio, and attacked the patrons with a machete in what was described as a bloodbath. Berry was shot dead. CNSnews.com reports 98,799 Somali refugees have settled in the United States since 9/11. More than 99% of those refugees are Muslim, reflecting the religious makeup of Somalia's population, which is almost entirely Muslim, predominantly Sunni. The largest number of Somali refugees arriving in the country since 9/11 have been settled in Minnesota, almost 16,000, Ohio, more than 7,500, and sizable communities also in Texas, New York, and Arizona. America chose Trump for a reason. Paul Joseph Watson writes, "Just 3 weeks ago, Trump cautioned that Somali migrants in states such as Minnesota were refusing to integrate and that a portion of them posed a terror threat. Some of them are joining ISIS and spreading their extremist views all over our country and all over the world," said Trump. Of course, no one wants to call it a terror attack, but Berry and Artan were just following orders from terrorists. Business Insider reports Michael Smith, the founder of Security from Kronos Advisory, who has advised Congress on terror-related issues, pointed out on Twitter that an ISIS video released days before the OSU attack showed a French ISIS member demonstrating how to kill people using knives. The ISIS member also called for attacks in the West, and in the past 2 months, English-language ISIS propaganda magazines have called for vehicle and knife attacks. Sorry, Anna de Rothschild and Senator Tim Kaine. Thanks to people like you and your globalist policies, this is precisely why Americans need their Second Amendment rights.